Would you like to learn some tips on how to have a meaningful conversation? Then listen to this entire video where I go through several different steps and provide you with advice on how to sort of set up the perfect situation for a meaningful conversation. Okay, let's go. Before we start, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, and how to reduce suffering in life. Let's go. Okay, so in order for someone to have a meaningful conversation, I think they need to feel like they have been meaningfully engaged in. Now, every human has the deep urge to feel validated and accepted, and also for their existence to be acknowledged. They want to be noticed, in other words. And you can reflect on the times you may have felt ignored in social situations and how sort of horrible and sort of worthless you might have felt. Like you weren't enough. And I feel we are sort of maybe always on the brink of feeling ignored or worthless in life every single day. So you're regularly on the point where you kind of feel like you're not enough. And if you can have somebody who notices and acknowledges your existence, they truly adore that, and that feels amazing if you get accepted for who you really are. And you give somebody validation and you get validation when that happens to you. It's something that I think humans really crave most. And in a meaningful conversation, you give your undivided attention to someone's existence, and you focus on nothing else other than them, and that is sort of the purest indication of that you really care about them. And that is why meaningful conversations are so powerful, is because the conversational partner truly acknowledges your existence, values it, and accepts it, and that feels sensational. Now, meaningful conversations are sort of relatively scarce, I would say, for the average person, so you don't really experience them often. And when you do have one, you sort of experience a peak moment because they're so unusual and they clearly stand out. They rise above the rest of your talks which you have. And now you could think, okay, so in order to set that up, I would need to find a way to break the script of of my conversations. Like, how would I break it? Here's a good tip. Vulnerability. Now, people typically don't like to show their weaknesses or vulnerabilities out of fear of somebody using them against them. People don't like to trust, for example, at work, colleagues tend to keep their conversations superficial or work-related because they're in a competitive environment and afraid of opening up to the wrong person and making a mistake, let's say. And showing vulnerability is extremely powerful for the following reason. When you show vulnerability, you make a powerful gesture. You show your conversational partner something precious about you, and you trust them with it. And something inside of that person feels like a moral obligation to protect your vulnerability. It's a meaningful moment when that occurs, and it takes great courage to show vulnerability, so it's really an act of bravery and power. And because this happens quite rarely, when it occurs, you realize, wow, this connection I have with this person it's truthful, and it is different, it's authentic, and that's why it's valuable. And very interestingly, because this is so valuable, this gesture of showing vulnerability, breaking that trust is a terrible act. And this is something that Dante, the Italian poet, exemplified nicely in his book Inferno, where he describes the journey towards hell, and he portrays hell as having different layers, and the further you go down in the layers, the more reprehensible your crime was, and of course, at the core of hell sits Satan. And each layer is named or described based on a certain type of act that needs to be committed in order to end in the layer. There's different sort of layers. For example, I believe one is adultery, which, for example, Cleopatra lies within. And there's also, I think the first layer, which is the layer of sort of rationality or philosophy, where famous Greek philosophers ended in. And then at the bottom sits Satan, and Satan lies in that because the core layer, the furthest, the deepest layer of hell is occupied by beings who broke trust, who went behind someone's back. I forgot the word of it. This is a bit embarrassing. Let me quickly look it up. Whatever. It's the layer of... I need to look this up. It is the last layer, the ninth circle. Treachery. It's treason. It is going behind someone's back, and Satan lies in that layer, sits in that layer because he went behind God's back. And this is the breaking of the trust or vulnerability. That's what it is. Yeah. And that's why it's so precious to protect. And because when you offer the vulnerability, you make a gesture, and this sort of moral compass gets ignited within the other person, and typically they would protect it, but it takes real, let's say, evil to break that then, and actually to commit treachery, let's say. Yeah. And finally, the last tip is, I think you can easily build up a meaningful conversation if you talk about the reality of human life and emotion. And that's usually bound to be meaningful because it provides you with a moment of relief. You are able to express your honest thoughts and emotions, which doesn't come by easily, and it's certainly difficult to find places to do so. Hence, when you do actually come to talk about how you really feel as a human, what's really going on, what's truthful in your life, then you first of all take a burden off of your shoulders because you can finally speak about it, and it takes a burden off your shoulders because you don't have to hide it anymore. You don't have to walk around like it's judged against or it's suboptimal. You can just be honest and accept who you are and what you're going through, and that's wonderful, and that's what makes it meaningful and why it stands out in comparison to your other conversations you have. Okay, so in conclusion, you can set up a meaningful conversation by showing someone's existence that you really care. And I actually made another previous video on called how to make people like you, where I discuss how to, or the intuition behind giving somebody your undivided attention and why they love that. Okay, second tip is talking about the scarcity of human meaningful conversation. So if you can find a way that makes a conversation step out of the norm and authentic, that will likely make it meaningful. And talking about vulnerability, for example, is a good way to do so because people typically don't open up about their insecurities, and if you do, it's a noble gesture, which is powerful. And finally, talking truthfully about your existence, what's going on in your head and your body and in your personal life. If you can find a space to talk to someone about that, that's very meaningful because it's true. And not a lot of conversations we have discuss the true reality of nature and our lives. And if you can find a place to actually talk about that, then it really is, it's powerful. Okay, so please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like this video and you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, and how to reduce suffering in life. Okay, thank you for listening.